Welcome to Look Ahead Radio with Tom Arms and Lockwood Phillips.
Viewpoints around the world with Tom Arms this afternoon. I'm looking forward to this conversation this afternoon. I do want to advise you that our hour with Tom Arms of Look Ahead Radio has been pre-recorded so that he can engage in some Christmas holiday activities there in London. So that being said, as always, to remind you, every Wednesday afternoon we have joining us Tom Arms of Look Ahead Radio and also LookAheadNews.com. And with that, Thomas, as we begin the program, Merry Christmas to you, and thank you for joining us.
Merry Christmas to you, or as we say over here, Happy Christmas.
Happy Christmas. Okay, very quickly, what does Happy Christmas look like insofar as both the visuals and the temperature?
The temperature is lovely. I'd say it's about 50. It's quite nice. There's Christmas decorations up on the streets, and, the trees are decorated, except ours. We don't decorate our tree until Christmas Eve.
Mm-hmm. The old school, as it were.
It's looking very nice.
Yeah, the old school, because in reality, in past, literally St. Nicholas would decorate the trees in some families. So that's very interesting. Real quick question. Is there shall we say, a religious component to the European Christmas as it is here in the States? And yes, we still have a religious component, much to the chagrin of some.
Oh, yes, there is. There's very much a religious component. There's midnight. I will be going to midnight mass at the Tower of London.
Whoa. Well, yes. That's a frightening thought. And I say that intentionally for what the tower is known. Do you see a lot of tourists there in London at this time of year?
Not too many, but I don't live in a touristy area.
Okay.
There are a few. Most people around the world at Christmas, they want to be with their families. They don't want to travel.
Interesting. Well, I'll talk about that a little later on. I was talking to some folks. They're beginning to think more travel here in the States, but that's for later in the conversation because I want to touch on some topical issues, some news. But first, just to remind everyone, this portion of the program has been pre-recorded, so I'm not giving out the phone numbers. There's no benefit to making phone calls. But if you wish, you can also email us at viewpointsradio@hotmail.com or via Facebook at Viewpoints on the Talk Station. Tom's joining us from London, and I want to go to some topical issues before we touch on the issue of a Christmas around the world. We're going to hear from Tom later in the program what it's like in other countries, how it's celebrated. I think it's a very timely discussion. But first, Tom, let's talk about topical issues. Let's start with the issue of North Carolina. You told me a few moments ago off air that what's taking place right now in North Carolina in the legislature with House Bill 2 and other issues with the governor's race has made news in Europe. It has?
Huge news. Headline news. Headline news here on the front pages. By the way, could I just add, if there's anyone listening who does, want to ask any questions about anything we raise this week, they can always phone up next week as well.
Okay, yes.
When we're probably in the normal time slot.
Yep, right.
But, it's huge news. And basically, it's not good news as far as the Democrats, or at least the way it's being reported, as far as the Democrats are concerned. Basically, they are being accused of gerrymandering. They are being accused of trying to rewrite the state constitution and state laws in order to take powers away from the
Republicans.
Republicans.
Yes.
I got it reversed. Yes. The Republicans trying to rewrite the state laws, the state constitution, to take power away from the new Democrat governor, and they're not coming out of it very well in the reports here in Europe.
Interesting. So the story related to Governor elect Cooper and the changes in his administration as a result of legislative action in North Carolina is actually making news in Europe. Is that an indication, Tom, that it's a slow news week in Europe? And I have to say that tongue-in-cheek in light of the events in Germany, which we'll touch on. But why would anyone in Europe care about North Carolina?
It is an indication of the increasing importance of North Carolina, and in particular Charlotte.
Wow.
Charlotte is an important world hub.
Well, it is.
It is. I mean, increasingly important. More and more people from Europe are flying in and out of Charlotte, and they're doing business in Charlotte.
Amazing.
And And so what happens in North Carolina is important. North Carolina is important politically. It is seen as one of those states which is sort of borderline Republican Democrat, can go either way, but with a very strong Republican element. And North Carolina is becoming increasingly important in European eyes.
All right. And, of course, we're hearing this from Tom Arms, who's in London, England, as we speak.
Of course, I have relatives there. That might have something to do with it.
That may have. Yes, they're very attuned to what Tom Arms is very concerned with. By the way, Look Ahead Radio and also LookAheadNews.com. I definitely want to recommend the website to you as well. Tom, before we get into other issues about Christmas around the world, we've got about 3 minutes. Let's talk about the topic of Germany and the events there. And I've also got to bring up the issue of Turkey very quickly, but we've seen a lot of unrest. Germany, Chancellor Merkel looks like she's facing serious pushback from her constituents. What's happened since the truck accident there in Germany?
Well, it just came over a few hours ago, but they think they've identified the person responsible. Now, they're not certain of his name because he has several different aliases, but they think he was Tunisian and that he entered the country in July 2015, asked for political asylum, and was refused political asylum, but they couldn't deport him back to Tunisia because he didn't even have any documentation papers. So there was no proof that he was Tunisian. So he's been jumping all over the country, trying to avoid arrest for over a year, maybe 2 years now. And they found his wallet with identification in it, which seems to point to this man who they think is Tunisian. The Alternative for Deutschland, Frauke Petry, started off by saying, well, we got to be careful. She sort of backed Angela Merkel. We got to be careful. We don't want to create a lot of what she called anxiety and hatred. But then shortly afterwards, she changed her tune and said, we're under attack.
Right.
And we've got to treat this as a war.
Right.
So, they're back to their old position.
Okay. What impact will this have on Germany during this Christmas season and the issue of politics? What impact will this have on Chancellor Merkel?
It's too early to say with any certainty. You have to remember, Alternative for Deutschland, and in particular Germany, has what's called a proportional representation system. That is, they have representation in the Bundestag and the Bundesrat according to the number of, or the percentage of the votes they receive from the electorate. Alternative for Deutschland has about 10 to 12% of the electorate supporting them. That means 88 to 90% don't support them. That's at the moment, I know.
Okay,
it may change.
This could quickly change. All right, I want to move for another quick item because we've only got a few moments before the next break. The issue in Turkey and Russia, and we've all seen it in videos here in the States, the ambassador that was killed. I did see an interesting story, though. Russia and Turkey still are maintaining close relations.
Absolutely.
Is this an intention really on the part of Putin, or is this an intention of the president of Erdogan of Turkey?
Both of them.
Okay. So this is an effort to...
Both of them. I don't think they want to fall out.
Okay. So
there's no indication that Erdogan is in any way responsible. Basically, it was a protest against the Russian actions in Aleppo.
Right.
And the man in the street in Turkey is very, very angry. Erdogan, however, wants good relations with Russia because he's got bad relations with Europe.
Right.
So he has to have good relations with someone. And he's leaning more and more towards Russia. They're both powerful men. They appreciate each other's power. And that's what they're going to go for. They're going to go for the man who's most like him.
All right. The conclusion to this, though, is I don't know how a better way to describe it other than two hungry bears in the forest, or one might say two snakes in the grass. It's going to be interesting because I don't say how one can trust the other. But I will not go there. I got to be careful on that. I will leave it because I may create an international incident. We've got joining us this afternoon Tom Arms of Look Ahead Radio and, of course, LookAheadNews.com. You're listening to a special program this evening. We are pre-recording with Tom Arms here on Viewpoints Around the World.
Look Ahead Radio will return in just a moment.
This is Tom Arms with LookAheadNews.com's World Report for the week beginning the 26th of December. LookAheadNews.com broadcasts tomorrow's news today so that you can plan to participate. 2016 is drawing to a close, and Japan and America this week are closing the diplomatic book on Pearl Harbor. On Monday, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe arrives in Hawaii, and on Tuesday he and President Obama lay a wreath at the scene of the Japanese attack that brought America into World War II. Most of the rest of the world will be recovering from Christmas dinner, preparing for the New Year celebrations, and another interesting year to come. But there are a few exceptions. On Wednesday, King Salman of Saudi Arabia gives his annual address, and the following day it is the turn of the newly appointed Prime Minister of Italy, Paolo Gentiloni. On New Year's Eve, German Chancellor Angela Merkel gives her annual televised speech. On Thursday, the final results of the presidential elections in Haiti are expected to be confirmed with the official announcement of Jovenel Moise as the winner. New Year's Eve falls on Saturday this year, but celebrations in Scotland's Edinburgh start the day before and last 4 days. Known as Hogmanay, they involve street theatre, dancing, fireworks, large quantities of Scotch whisky, and the singing of Auld Lang Syne. Next year are big anniversary years for both Finland and Canada, and the celebrations will start on New Year's Eve. It will be 150 years since the formation of the Canadian Confederation and 100 years since Finland won its independence from Russia. And finally, the most famous clock in the world, London's Big Ben, will fall silent on New Year's Day as it starts to undergo $30 million of repairs lasting several months. And that was next week's News Today from LookAheadNews.com so that you can plan to participate in the world around you. Stay tuned after this message for the expanded Look Ahead World Analysis.
They say the best things in life are free. So, hey, why are we paying so much for our basic information and entertainment needs? The average cable TV bill has more than doubled in the last 10 years. The price of movie tickets keeps going up. So, exactly what is free today anyway? Well, you're listening to it. Local radio. Support the advertisers that support this radio station. And keep listening. We won't send you a bill. There are still some things you just shouldn't have to pay for.
This is Tom Arms with LookAheadNews.com's expanded world analysis for the week beginning the 26th of December. LookAheadNews.com broadcasts tomorrow's news today so that you can plan to participate. In May, President Barack Obama laid a wreath at Hiroshima, where the world's first atomic bomb ended World War II. On Tuesday, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe lays a wreath at Pearl Harbor, the U.S. naval base where 75 years ago, Japanese pushed America into the war. Both leaders have said their respective acts symbolize the transition from warring nations to close allies. Next week is a week for the start of the annual addresses from the world leaders. On Wednesday, Saudi Arabia's King Salman is expected to talk about the war in Yemen and plans to create the world's largest sovereign wealth fund by privatizing the Saudi oil holding company Aramco. Next, it is the turn of Italy's Paolo Gentiloni, who will be only 2 weeks into the job. He succeeds Matteo Renzi, who resigned after his constitutional referendum defeat at the beginning of the month. Prime Minister Gentiloni will focus on immigration, relations with Europe and the country's parlous economic condition, which recently led to the Italian Parliament voting a $20 billion bailout for the world's oldest bank. Germany will still be reeling from the terrorist attacks on the Christmas market in Berlin when Chancellor Angela Merkel goes before the television cameras on New Year's Eve. This will be her last annual address before elections in 2017. She will focus on European unity, immigration, and the need for calm in the face of ISIS-inspired attacks. The official date for the 150th anniversary of the formation of the Canadian Federation is Canada Day on July 1st, 2017. But the Canadians have planned a year of celebrations, starting with a New Year's Eve pyro-musical fireworks display in Ottawa and free festivities on Parliament Hill. For most of its recorded history, Finland has been a political football pass between Sweden and Russia. At the start of the 19th century, Russia took firm control, but when the communists took over, they gave Finland their independence on 6th of December 1917. So Finland, like Canada, has a big political anniversary and is starting the year with a big fireworks display and celebrations in Helsinki on New Year's Eve. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Atlantic, Jovenel Moise will on Thursday be officially confirmed as the winner of Haiti's November presidential elections. Any celebrations are likely to be muted, though, because the country is still struggling to recover from Hurricane Matthew. And that was next week's News Today from LookAheadNews.com, so that you can plan to participate in the world around you. Stay tuned for Viewpoints Around the World with myself and Lockwood Phillips.
Welcome back to Look Ahead Radio. Here is Lockwood Phillips.
Viewpoints on the talk station, FM 107, AM 1240. Our guest this afternoon, of course, Tom Arms of LookAhead Radio, LookAheadNews.com. As always, it's a pleasure to have him joining us. We're going to now focus on issues of Christmas around the world. And I've got to say that there's some instances and incidences in Germany and Europe that, of course, are going to have, I think, an influence on Christmas around the world. I would like to just start with that, since we just finished the conversation a few moments ago. Germany. Let's look at what's happening in Germany. We'll wrap it up with the United Kingdom. But what's it like in Germany, Italy, China? We'll get to those areas as well. The Netherlands.
Well, we'll start with Germany. You know, one big thing on the continent, and in particular in Germany, is the Christmas market.
Okay.
They love their Christmas markets, and everyone flocks to the Christmas markets in the month or so before Christmas. And that's why it's so poignant that this terrorist attack, if indeed we haven't yet confirmed it was, but it almost certainly was, if this that this terrorist attack was on one of the most famous Christmas markets. And in fact, only a year or so ago, I was standing right in the middle where that market is.
What happens?
My daughter run the Berlin Marathon.
Okay. Wow.
And, it's a big square, big plaza, and the Christmas markets are a huge family thing.
What happens at these Christmas markets?
Everyone goes to them.
What happens at these Christmas markets? You say everybody goes to them. Are these handcrafted items? What's there?
They're everything. They're everything. You know, traders have stores that are handcrafted items. There's mulled wine. There's sweet cakes and pastries. There's little outdoor restaurants. There's beer kellers. There's lots of presents for children, all sorts of things.
Now,
but the idea is everyone goes out as a family. They have pa bands, and they dance in the street. Everyone just has a good time outside shopping.
All right. And is there, is this all the activities? What happens on Christmas Day in Germany, very quickly?
Well, on Christmas Day in Germany, on most of the continent, Christmas Day is not the big day.
Okay.
It's Christmas Eve.
All right.
And as you probably know, I mean, that's when they tend to, all over the continent, they tend to give their presents either on Christmas Eve or on St. Nicholas Day, which is the 5th or 6th of December. But in Germany, they exchange presents on Christmas Eve, and the children don't write letters to Santa.
What do? They
write them to baby Jesus, or Christkinder, as he's called.
That is.
And now, of course, there's a Hollywood influence about Santa Claus. And there's a big playground debate's been raging now for decades in the German playgrounds as to whether or not it's the Christkinder who brings the presents or Santa Claus.
Interesting.
Some children actually claim it's the parents.
Oh, well, we know better. But, the interesting aspect of this, unfortunately, we're seeing the influence of a significant influence of the American psyche and focus. That's one of the benefits of having you on the air with us this afternoon, Tom. And Tom Arms, of course, Look Ahead Radio with us. We're getting a flavor and a sense of Christmas in other locations. We were just chatting about Germany. Tom.
Let me tell you, though, you talk about the American influence. The best example of that is China and Japan.
Okay.
1% of the population in those countries is Christian. Okay, so it's not a Christian event. It is a commercial event.
Well, that's what it is here.
Commercial event, and And outside of the cities in China, nobody knows about Christmas. You mention Christmas, you say Merry Christmas, and you get a blank face. In Japan, though, they have something else, and they are absolutely wild, absolutely mad about Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Really?
Yes. It started in 1974 when there was a manager of one of the first Kentucky Fried Chickens, was a man, I think it was Takanishi Orawara, thought, we don't really have turkey over here. Maybe I could think of a way to substitute fried chicken for turkey to get their imagination.
Mm-hmm.
And so he put out a Christmas bucket. And the end result is now that you have to book your Christmas bucket 2 or 3 months in advance.
To be sure not.
They queue up outside the Kentucky Fried Chicken franchises on Christmas Day, and they have big Christmas buckets filled with cakes and pies and fried chicken.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, again, what percentage of Japan is Christian?
1%. Okay,
and yet Christmas is become a major event. I'll use the word holiday in Japan.
Yes. Yes, it has. I mean, it's any excuse for a party.
Well, that's true. What are they celebrating, just out of curiosity? Just because, obviously it's a pagan holiday. It has its roots in Scandinavia. We'll get to that in a few minutes. But what are they celebrating in Japan, just out of curiosity?
Just Christmas. It was sort of thing which brought to them by probably the American occupation. And they saw, the Americans were having such a good time, mm-hmm. and it was a big holiday for them, or vacation, and they wanted to emulate it.
Very interesting.
Go along with it. They probably started off decorating their stores in the 50s and the streets in order to get the Americans to buy in the stores.
Well, okay, that makes sense.
Just carried on from there.
Okay, and the other aspect of it, as you just said a moment ago, it's a retail event in Japan. All right, we're going to continue this conversation here in just a moment with Tom Arms of LookAhead Radio, and as always, to remind you, LookAheadNews.com. You're listening to Viewpoints Around the World here on the talk station FM 107 AM 1240.
Look Ahead Radio will return in just a moment.
Quick, what do these sounds have in common? These are the sounds of geography. Geography helps us understand connections between people and places. But our kids aren't getting enough of it. Half can't locate Japan or India, and 20% can't even find the Pacific Ocean. So we created MyWonderfulWorld.org to give kids the power of global knowledge. Go to MyWonderfulWorld.org to learn more. It's a wonderful world.
We now return to Look Ahead Radio. Here is Lockwood Phillips.
Viewpoints on the talk station FM 107 AM 1240. Tom Arms with us this afternoon, and again, this portion of the program has been pre-recorded. Tom has other commitments for the evening, and I'm appreciative of this. He's got family joining him. We're going to find out more details about Christmas around the world. We've just talked briefly about Germany and Japan. I want to touch on China very quickly, then we'll move on to other countries. Japan, of course, it is a popular retail event. China, likewise, again, not a large Christian community. Christmas has at its roots the birth of Christ. Don't forget, this is Hanukkah as well coming up. But real quickly, Tom, what's the interest in China?
Well, it's the same. It's a huge retail event. People dress up as Santa Claus. They have Santa Claus parties. By the way, if you're in China at Christmas, the Mandarin for Chinese is Sheng Den Kuai Li.
Okay, that's important. One more time so that we get the proper pronunciation.
Well, I'm not certain you're going to get it from me, but I'll give it a go.
Okay.
Sheng Dan Kuai Li.
All right, Shindang Wiley. I like that, Tom. That's one of the reasons.
You want it for Santa Claus? Santa, in case you have to ask, for a present from Santa. Shen Dan Lao Wen.
Shinden Lauwen. Well, we always want a president from Santa. This is fascinating. Of course, we're talking with Tom Armstrong. Again, this portion has been pre-recorded. Let's go to the other side of the world for a few moments, back to Europe. Let's start with Italy. What is Christmas like in Italy? Its strong Catholic roots.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. The big thing in Italy is nativity sets. Mm-hmm. That's where nativity sets came from. And they can actually date it to an exact time and place. It's all down to St. Francis Assisi, who in the year 1232, and you probably know he's the most famous and most revered of Italian saints, mm-hmm. but in 1232, he went on pilgrimage to the Holy Land, and he visited Bethlehem, and he was inspired to create nativity scenes in Italy. And he came back and he made the first nativity scenes, and that's where it comes from. Italy is famous the world over for its nativity scenes, and in particular in Naples, where they had the largest nativity set in the world with 600 pieces. And throughout Southern Europe, it's not just the Holy Family, which is a nativity set. They put in politicians and celebrities. They have waterfalls and forests and trains and everything else.
Fascinating. All right. How is Santa Claus treated in Italy? The whole issue of, again, this relationship with St. Nicholas, and that's a Scandinavian introduction. We'll get to that a little later on. But how is that incorporated in Italy?
Well, Santa's called Babbo Natale. Generally speaking, in Italy, he's probably a bit bigger, but traditionally, there are no presents in Italy on Christmas Day. The Italian children have to wait until January the 6th.
Okay.
The 12th day of Christmas.
Right.
Because that's when the three wise men arrived with their presents for the baby Jesus. Makes sense, really.
Yeah, it does. And of course, it's described by some as Old Christmas, as a matter of fact. All right. So what about the whole buildup of Christmas? We've been working on Christmas since Thanksgiving here in the States, actually probably since Labor Day. But besides that, what is the motivation, the excitement? Is there any at this time of year, or is it working up and then it's just designated at a particular time?
Well, no, each country seems to have a different day they celebrate.
Interesting.
For me, the most interesting one is the Netherlands. Mm-hmm. And they have Santa Claus or St. Nicholas.
Right.
And they celebrate the Christmas not Christmas. They celebrate the giving of gifts on St. Nicholas Day on the 5th of December. Now, we all know that Santa Claus comes from the North Pole.
Right.
No, St. Nicholas comes from Spain.
Now that you mentioned that, I'm aware of this story, so share this.
Santa Claus comes from Spain. Not only does he come from Spain, but every year he arrives by boat. A physical Santa Claus arrives by boat, pulls into one of the harbors, and it changes from year to year which harbor it is. One of the harbors in the Netherlands, and thousands of children come down to greet him.
What is the background with Spain? Why Spain?
Well, Clement Moore wrote the story about Santa Claus, and that created the whole aura of the reindeer and everything else.
Right.
Before that, it didn't exist. Now it's about 1820 or something. About the same time, I can't remember his name, there was a Dutchman who was writing about Santa Claus, and he came up with the same story. But instead of Santa Claus or Sinterklaas or St. Nicholas coming from the North Pole, he came from Spain because he had an assistant called Zwart Peter, or Peter, called Black Peter. Mm-hmm. And he was a Moor. And Moors in those days were associated as being black.
Right.
They came from Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And the Moors were in Spain. And so that's why, and he was Santa Claus's assistant, and that's why he had to come from Spain.
This, again, we're talking about the Netherlands, and of course, St. Nicholas is a Netherlands. Is that a Netherlands or Scandinavia? Let's move to
Netherlands.
All right. What about Scandinavia? Of course, that's all part of that part of the world.
Scandinavia, the big day in Scandinavia is not so much Christmas, it's St. Lucia's Day. Now, St. Lucia's Day happens, I think it's on about the 12th or something of December. And that stems from a pagan festival of light, which was practiced to try and brighten things up during the winter solstice period. And when the missionaries came to convert the Scandinavians, this festival was taking place, and they came up with a Christian martyr called St. Lucia.
Okay.
And St. Lucia was a Roman Christian martyr, a young girl who used to walk through the catacombs with a candle stuck on her head so she could see where she was going, and handing out food and provisions to to the Christians who were hiding in the catacombs. And so the missionary said, well, we can relate that story to their pagan festival, and we'll call it St. Lucia's Day. And so they celebrate that. And every child or every school has a St. Lucia that is elected to represent them. Every county, every town, even a national St. Lucia in Sweden.
Wow. All right. Now, we touch on something, and then we'll move to Russia here for a few more moments.
Can I just say one other thing about Sweden, which I forgot? It's this is alongside the Kentucky Fried Chicken. This is one big American import, which has become a big tradition in Sweden. It's Donald Duck.
Oh, my land. All right. And
wait a minute. Since 1959, every Christmas Eve at midday, everyone turns on the televisions to watch a film called Donald Duck and His Friends Wish You a Merry Christmas.
Amazing. All right, that's in Scandinavia or Sweden. Okay, let's talk. Yep. Let's talk very quickly about Russia. Then I want to get. We'll have to take a quick break. But what is Christmas like in Russia?
Well, it's a whole month later.
Really?
They work on a different calendar. The Russian Orthodox Church uses the old Julian calendar, and so everything happens a month later. So that's the main thing.
Well, no,
Santa Claus is known as Grandfather Frost, or in Russian, Ded Moroz.
No,
and he doesn't visit Russian children on Christmas Eve. He comes on New Year's Eve, which is 2 days before Christmas. So in one respect, he comes early, and in another respect, he comes late.
Okay, now let's talk here quickly about Russia, and particularly with two issues. One, the religious component, and secondly, how much of this is oriented towards children rather than adults. And I'm really interested in how the Russians treat this. But first, what about the religious component of Christmas in Russia? Is it recognized? What?
Oh, yes, very much so. I mean, they've rediscovered their religion. It was always sort of subsumed, but it's such an important part of their identity as Russians, the Russian Orthodox Church.
Right.
It's in the name, Russian Orthodox Church.
Right.
And Putin has embraced the Orthodox Church because he's presenting himself as a nationalist figure. And he has won the support of the Orthodox Church, who see him as their representative.
All right. And the other quick question for you is, how much of this is oriented towards children versus the adults, and particularly the concept of commercialism? How much of that in Russia?
I think, it's a child's festival, just like it is in the West. They
wait. Let's be careful.
They give out presents on New Year's Eve. It's a big family event. They have a big 12-course meal. Each course is named after an apostle.
Wow.
One thing they do is they make a porridge consisting of wheat, honey, and poppy seeds called kutia. And then they take a big lump of the porridge and they throw it onto the ceiling. And if it sticks, it's supposed to bring good luck for the year.
All right. You said a moment ago, child's celebration. Well, it's the child and all of us that we enjoy Christmas, but also, of course, we also recognize the importance of it religiously here in the States. We're going to get back to this. Go ahead. You were going to say.
I think we enjoy it through the children, too.
We definitely do enjoy it through the children. You're listening to Viewpoints Around the World, and we're getting Christmas around the world from Tom Arms of LookAhead Radio, which you hear every Friday afternoon here on the talk station. Also heard in radio stations around the world now. He's continuing to grow his audience. Also, LookAhead News LookAhead.com. Again, our guest this afternoon, pre-recorded Tom Arms of Look Ahead Radio.
Look Ahead Radio will return in just a moment.
Observations of an Expat by Tom Arms from LookAheadNews.com. It's been a good year for journalists. I've never known better. There's been an endless march of upsets, twists, turns, worries, cheers, jeers, doom, gloom, and unadulterated surprise joy. Half the world is sunk into a slough of despond deeper than the Marianas Trench, and the other half is waving their anti-globalist flags from the top of Everest. The Western world is the most divided it has been since World War II, divided within countries and divided between countries. The authoritarian East is a different story. They're watching the democratic West self-destruct and going about their business and rattling their sabers to let the rest of the world know that they are prepared to move into the yawning political vacuum. Russia is well placed to pick up the pieces from America's failed Middle East policy. The victory in Aleppo has established the military supremacy of Vladimir Putin's buddy Bashar al-Assad, the dictator everyone loves to hate. But Putin is not trying to win a popularity contest. He wants power and is prepared to go to any length, including manipulating U.S. presidential elections, to obtain it. China's President Xi Jinping is no model of restraint himself. His growing military bases in the South China Sea are a testament to that. The Brexit campaign started the ball rolling and introduced the word post-truth into the political lexicon. The word became so popular that the Oxford English Dictionary named it Word of the Year. Politicians, well, they've never been known for their veracity, but they outdid themselves in 2016 as the Brexiteers discovered that if you shout loud enough and long enough, no matter how outrageous the lie, you will be believed if it is a lie that the neglected voters want to believe. Of course, the Brexiteers didn't act alone. They had a significant boost from the opposing Remain camp. To start with, there was the decision of Conservative Prime Minister David Cameron to put party before country and call the referendum in the first place. Then there was the lackluster performance of Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn, which has left a continuing question mark hanging over his actual position on the Brexit issue. Surreal? Well, that's another good word to describe it. And funnily enough, that is the word of the year for the American dictionary publishers Merriam-Webster. That and post-truth are both excellent descriptions of the culmination of the political year, the election of billionaire property developer Donald J. Trump as President of the United States. His campaign was one long xenophobic, misogynistic, narcissistic rant. It included the controversy of Obama's birth certificate, an attack on menstruating journalists, locker room banter, an attack on the parents of an American war hero, a proposed ban on Muslims entering the United States, the branding of Mexican immigrants as rapists, and finally, he exposed himself as friendless by declaring, "I am the smartest man I know." But half of the American voters, actually less than half, believed him, because like their British cousins, they feel disenfranchised by years of political neglect. And the lies were the ones they wanted to believe. As has been the case for centuries, the Anglo-Saxons are leading the world. Gaps between pro- and anti-Europeans, pro- and anti-immigration, pro- and anti-globalization are breaking out in France, Sweden, Belgium, Germany, Poland, Italy, all across what used to be called the Western Alliance. It's been a good year for me. I am a journalist. And with the world still terribly divided, 2017 looks even better. For the rest of you, well...
Welcome back to Look Ahead Radio. Here is Lockwood Phillips.
Viewpoints on the talk station, FM 107 AM 1240. Tom Arms with us this afternoon. This portion has been pre-recorded, I've mentioned several times, due to his other commitments today as we prepare for the Christmas season. And Tom is calling from his home in London, England. And Tom, let's talk about first France, and then we'll wrap it up with back to your home community there in the UK and London. France, what is Christmas like there? And again, I have to bring up the concerns related to the issues of security and, of course, the events in Germany recently, as recently as just 2 days ago. What's the mood? What are the events in France? How do the French deal with Christmas?
Well, there's still a state of emergency in France. But I think most people will be, celebrating it as they normally do. And as I said, throughout Europe, most of them celebrate it on Christmas Eve. Mm-hmm. Santa's called Père Noël, or Noël, and Merry Christmas is Bon Natal. And the big thing in France, well, there's several big things. There's the Yule logs. Those tend to be French. They are traditionally from cherry trees. So if you want a real French Yule log, you cut down the cherry tree. So George Washington would have been happy making his...
Absolutely.
His Yule logs.
What do they do? The Yule logs, other than creating fires, what else do they do?
Well, they sprinkle them with red wine.
Okay.
And that increases the aroma.
Uh-huh.
And they sing Christmas carols, and they carry them into the house and put them on the fire and drink lots more red wine, I suppose.
Okay. All right.
Very French.
When do they celebrate?
Probably throwing a bit of cheese too.
Absolutely. When do they celebrate Christmas in France? Is it on Christmas Day?
Again, Christmas Eve.
Christmas Eve.
Most people, it's Christmas Eve. They go to midnight mass. What tends to happen is they go to midnight mass, and then they celebrate when they come back from midnight mass. They're up most of the night. In Russia, the Russian Orthodox church services or masses are incredibly long. So they don't come out of church until 4 or 5 in the morning.
Wow.
So it's a marathon event.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about the UK now. Let's move to London again, back to your home and to the United Kingdom in general. The whole issue of Christmas, when does it begin to be recognized, and when is it, if you will, celebrated?
Well, it's starting earlier and earlier. We had Christmas decorations going up in some shops in September, which is ridiculous. I suppose you've got the same there.
Yes.
And that's the commercial element. Traditionally, it starts on the 1st of December.
Okay.
Almost the same time. And you have, there's the religious element, there's the commercial element, there's the social element. Christmas parties start about the second week in December. There are Christmas parties back to back.
Oh, my goodness.
I've got 2 or 3 tonight.
He's bragging
this week.
He's bragging.
That sort of thing.
Let me quick question. We've only got about a minute. One of the key elements of Christmas, and it's something that, is quite frankly near and dear to my heart. As a matter of fact, I was given a gift of George C. Scott's rendition of Scrooge and Charles Dickens. What about that? Do you have a lot of plays of Scrooge and Dickens at this time of year?
Oh, yes. Yeah, well, it's all on television. There are various things which are always traditionally on television here. There's a channel which is devoted to Christmas films. Scrooge is one of them.
Okay.
All the variations of Scrooge, including the Muppets.
Uh-huh. Oh.
And we also have White Christmas, and we have Miracle on 34th Street.
So you've got but I'm just curious.
We have all those things which are shown at Christmas. On Christmas Day, the Queen always gives her Christmas message.
And this year?
At 3 p.m.
Or 3 p.m.
And everyone is supposed to gather around the television and listen to the Queen talk about whatever she wants to talk about that year. It's usually some sort of summary of the year and what we should be thinking. As
we wrap it up with you, Ross has made me a note. A Christmas Story, is that well received in England?
You mean The Christmas Carol?
No, A Christmas Story, the movie.
I don't think so. I don't remember that one.
Okay. We will talk about that at a later time. We're running out of time with you this afternoon. But I want to thank you and wish you a Merry Christmas, Tom, to you, your family, and a safe one. And we've got so much to talk about with New Year just around the corner.
I'd like to do the same. And also, all the listeners, thank you very much indeed. Every single one of you, all of you who phone up, the ones who don't phone up, you know, it's just nice to know that someone out there is listening, and I wish you all a very, very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Tom Arms of Look Ahead Radio and Look Ahead News here on the special edition of Viewpoints on the Talk Station.
Look Ahead Radio is a production of the Talk Station.